Hello, welcome to Record Sports Hotline Live. My name is Daniel Caw. I'm delighted to be joined in this late night edition by the one and only Keith Jackson. Keith, how's it going?
Put the hours in, don't we, Dan?
Listen, we're no heroes. Don't want to go on about it. We've already got comments coming in thick and fast. Obviously, we're here after Panathinaikos 1, Rangers 1, which sees Rangers go through 3-1 on aggregate. If you want to get involved in the conversation, please do so. We were saying just before we come on there, Keith, a weird tie, but Rangers won't care about that. They're through.
All over the place. First of all, first and foremost, congratulations to Rangers. Brilliant to see Scottish teams get through these difficult stages in the summer. And I hope that Rangers have set the tone, and I hope that we see similar results for Dundee United and Hibs tomorrow. And, you know, Scottish clubs progressing, that's really important. Congratulations to Russell Martin, because that was a real horrible tie to have to navigate in his first two games as Rangers manager. And he has bought himself some real breathing space, because no matter what happens now, and by the way, the chances are that Rangers might have an easier time of it over the next round of qualifiers than against Panathinaikos. Whether it's Servette or Pilsen, that game's still going on. So congratulations all round. But I have to tell you, Daniel, I have no idea how they did it. And I'm not sure that if, hand on heart, Russell Martin and his players understand how they get through those two ties. The first hour tonight was, you know, there was absolutely nothing for Rangers fans to take from it or to enjoy from it. It gets to half time, it's basically Panathinaikos 0, Jack Butland and John Souttar 0. Well, it was.
No, it kind of was. You're right.
Because nobody else was contributing all over the pitch for Rangers. I don't know, Daniel. Look, I've said that Russell Martin will need a bit of time and patience from the supporters. He will help himself no end with the result there. But the performance in both games, there have been moments in it where, put it this way, if you're a Southampton fan, you're probably getting cold shivers and adopting the fetal position on the couch right now because of the flashbacks it will have given to last season. And Rangers have been fortunate over the two legs that they weren't punished. But the amount of times they gave the ball away in high-risk areas of the pitch, I'm almost at a loss for words to understand how they've quite managed it. But I'm really glad that they have. And what you have to say is, so for an hour, it was a kind of watching between the cracks of your fingers job for the Rangers supporters. And then 59 minutes in, the boy Gassama, I mean, what about the technique for that goal? That's stunning. That's a stunning bit of technique from a boy that's just, you know, only just come onto the pitch off the bench. That's two kind of introductions he's given himself to the Rangers supporters. And I think that even though he's only been on the pitch for, I don't know, an hour, if that, over the two games, I think you can already reach the conclusion that Rangers have got a game changer on this boy. That finish tonight was top draw, as was his finish. Different sort of technique, obviously, in the first leg at Ibrox, but he connected so cleanly, and he had to get his knee over it. It was a difficult technique. Just couldn't hit it. It was a superb strike. So there are a lot of things for Rangers to be positive about, mostly the scoreline, the result over the two legs, progression, the fact that even if they can't get through any further into the Champions League, they've got Europa League group stages until the new year. All these are great bonuses. Gassama, brilliant bonus. But I think the Rangers fans as well, sitting there watching that, scratching their heads and wondering, you know, is this the way that Russell Martin wants it to play? And, you know, I'll come back to it because it was me that said it in the first place, Dan. They are going to have to give Russell Martin a bit of time and patience to see if he can get this team clicking the way he wants it to click. But there are similarities to what many Southampton fans would have watched at the start of last season in the Premier League with Russell Martin's side.
Well, there's a lot of Rangers fans that do actually agree with you, Keith, in the comment section. And if you're watching, you want to let us know your thoughts on not just tonight's game, but the tie overall, please do so. Rob says, through we go, but the first half was shocking. Miraculous not to concede. Some of Russell Martin's tactics are a real worry. Scott says, a tough watch, worse than last week. And this one, David says, I've never seen a luckier team in Europe than Rangers. Dominated for 3/4 of the 2 legs and win 3-1. So there is a lot of people, Keith, agreeing, and I'll actually just finish on this one because it's something that we talked about off air before we come on as well, and that was Max Aarons, who, I mean, look, I'll just read it out. Diesel says, I'll say it again, Aarons at left back will not work. Simple passing was terrible, and Souttar looked like he was towing a caravan. So Rangers fans obviously delighted to be through, but I think they're very conscious of the fact that there's, as you say, a lot of work to do.
It's difficult to judge Max Aarons, isn't it? One, he's playing out of position, but he has made a point of saying himself that he's very used to playing that left-hand side, even though he's right-footed. He didn't look particularly comfortable again tonight. The other thing that you've got to say, you know, as a mitigating factor, he's up against Pelistri, who, I mean, he must be a nightmare to come up against, whether you're right-footed, left-footed, or if you've got 3 feet. Because he's got absolute electric, rapid pace, a constant threat, a constant danger, and he's given over the 2 legs, Max Aarons, a bit of a roasting, hasn't he? So that's difficult, and you know, you've got to cut him a little bit of slack. He's getting he's getting used to playing in this team, new arrival. You know, I think he'd probably feel more comfortable on the right-hand side, even though he says that he knows the position on the left-hand side. But that was a really difficult couple of games for him, wasn't it? As the sort of baptism of fire as a Rangers player. Rangers fans will need to hope for substantially better from Max Aarons going forward. But how many times is it going to come up against a guy like Pelistri over the course of the season? I'm not too sure.
Look, there's plenty of Rangers fans that are countering it.
Do you know what I would say, Dan, before we move on from that? I'm still not convinced about the positioning of Nico Raskin to the left-hand side. Too much to the left-hand side for me. But I think they dovetailed. They seem to have a better understanding of where they had to be on the pitch tonight. It wasn't as obvious, kind of lopsided as it was in the first leg when Max Aarons was kind of almost pushing Raskin out of the central areas to come inside and as if he was going to dictate play from in there. I think he stuck more to a more sort of traditional left-back area tonight, and it didn't have the same knock-on effect with pushing Raskin's further out to the left, even though Raskin, I think, is better suited another 5-10 yards inside.
What I was going to say there was that there's a lot of Rangers fans countering it, what we're saying, by saying, obviously, and not just to win the tie, but, you know, new team bedding in, very high temperature, who cares how we played, job done, Gassama is a player. Yeah, and it can't be understated that, you know, Luke Skywalker, who comments regularly, saying as well, you know, you go and play in that heat for 90 minutes. I mean, I don't think we would fare too well in that heat, if I'm honest with you.
I've been at a few of these games in that sort of temperature. I'm really passing out in the press box, believe you me. So, absolutely gargantuan effort from these Rangers players. But I think it's legitimate to say that team needs to improve a great deal if it's going to be strong enough to put up a real challenge to Celtic domestically. And if it is to get through into the Champions League, then it's really going to have to come together quite quickly because you're not. That was a decent Panathinaikos side, but pretty average in European terms compared to some of the sides that you might come up against if you actually get through into the group stages.
Yeah. You remember I mentioned last week, Keith, we've got a guy that always comes on no matter what's happening and slags off James Tavernier. Alistair Ramage says, good result as always, as we always play with 10 men. So thanks for that, Alistair, we appreciate it. Mark says, genuinely can't wrap my head around how Rangers played so poorly across 2 legs and managed to qualify. Martin looks like he's going to stick to his guns and play his way no matter who Rangers come up against. Kind of echoing what you were saying, Keith, I would just play devil's advocate and say, look, it's not a terrible habit to not play particularly well and still come out on the winning side, is it? And it's something that not just Russell Martin's Rangers have been adept at doing, but Rangers generally in Europe have always had that trait.
Well, certainly over the last few years. Listen, Rangers have been the standard bearers for Scottish football on the European stage. There's no doubt about it. The coefficient points that they've helped to bring in as well has been good for the game. We're struggling a little bit now in terms of the coefficient, which is why Celtic are going to have to go into the playoff stages this time rather than straight into the group stage. So we need all the results we can get. And in terms of, listen, there are so many positives in the bigger picture for Rangers to be delighted about. But I don't think you can watch what's happened over the course of these two games and be deluded into thinking Russell Martin's flying here. He's got the team, playing this new brand of football, and they look great, because they didn't. And the sort of kamikaze stuff that we've seen over the two legs, let's get it right. Rangers have been pretty lucky, very fortunate, in fact, not to have played themselves into some real trouble at various times. I mean, there was one again in the first half tonight. I think it was Giga and Tavernier got themselves into a mess when there's no reason to do it. It looks like plain and simple overplaying in there. And I just don't. I can understand that Russell Martin's got his philosophy. I understand that the players are going to have to take a bit of time to get used to it. But that will give the Rangers supporters heart attacks. And it was exactly what the Southampton fans were seeing week in, week out at the start of last season in the Premier League. So I can understand this is the way Russell Martin wants to see his team playing, but they better start doing it a bit better. Because they'll not get away with that. I don't think they'll even get away with it domestically. So they'll need to sharpen up their act.
Well, in the comments, Mark says, we'll not get into the Champions League. We're not good enough to be there. He then goes on another comment to say, I says Europa League at most. It was something that dawned on me there, Keith. You mentioned a few minutes ago, but whether or not they'll be good enough to actually reach the league phase. Remember when Rangers were last in the group stage and it was an absolute disaster?
It was an ordeal.
It was traumatic.
Ultimately, I think that probably cost Gio Van Bronckhorst his position.
You're probably right.
Because it was such an ordeal for Rangers at that level. And he hadn't obviously been able to recruit the level of player that he wanted to recruit for it. They had a bunch of injuries. It was just a nightmarish experience all round for Rangers in the Champions League. With the sort of level of investment that's gone in this summer, you would like to think that they would certainly be better equipped to survive at that level. But they'll not survive if they make the same sort of basic mistakes and high-risk mistakes that they've made over the two legs against Panathinaikos, that's for sure.
The other night, I got slaughtered by Celtic fans for suggesting that perhaps a tilt at the Europa League this season would be better than the Champions League, and I'm about, I think, to say a similar thing. But if you're a Rangers fan or Russell Martin, how do I phrase this? Do you really want to make the Champions League, knowing that this Rangers team, even with 2 or 3 more signings, could take some real sore ones? If
you're Andrew Kavanagh or Parag Marath, you certainly do, because that's where the money is. And this is the start of something new for Rangers, and it is going to take time, and it is going to take money, and it's going to take a little bit of patience if they want to get to where they ultimately see themselves getting to, and they need all the help they can get. Now, financially, would it be a big help? I've no doubt about that. But in terms of the team and its growth, then there is a reasonable argument there, Daniel, that it might be better for Rangers to get into the Europa League, where they know that environment. They seem to absolutely thrive on Thursday night football. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, and that's where again I come back to what I said right at the start. That's why congratulations to Russell Martin, because he's negated the need to go into that next qualification hurdle just to qualify for the Europa League, and that looked like, whatever way it turns out, it's going to be a really difficult tie. So Rangers have avoided that, and the worst case scenario now is that they go into the Europa League and they've got group stage football all the way up to Christmas. That's brilliant news for the American investors. I'm sure they prefer the sort of a steroids version that you'll get in the Champions League in terms of the financial benefits that Rangers would stand to gain from it. But I think there's a valid argument there that in terms of the growth of the team on the pitch, maybe the Europa League might be a better place for them right now. But this is so early days in what Russell Martin's trying to put together. I think he'll want to sign 4 or 5, probably more new players to bring into this squad, to bring into his starting 11. And he's still got to work on the training ground every day, try to drill into the players that are there just now, exactly how it is that he wants this team to look and go about their business, because it is a big change. There's no doubt about that. What he's trying to implement is a big change, and it's a lot of information for these players to take on board. Struggling with it, Daniel, I'll be honest with you. It looked to me as if tonight they were confused as to what it is that they were actually trying to do.
Yeah.
And the rare moments in the first half when they did get up the pitch, there was a real lack of sort of, I don't know, purpose about what they were doing, getting into the final third. It was almost as if they hadn't planned for it. When they did have possession, they were keen to go back the way and round the houses, and they continually played themselves into trouble, and Panathinaikos pounced on them. That can't be what Russell Martin has in his mind for this team. It can't be, because it's not going to work if that's what it is. So I just think it's going to need more time, more work in the training ground. A lot of hours will need to go into it, because I think they're some way away from where Russell Martin would want them to be right now.
Gary is one of a few Rangers fans pointing out that the biggest game is on Saturday at 5:30. Obviously, their opening league game against Motherwell away. That's a tough one itself. That's a pretty hard game to start with, I would suggest. But you mentioned signings, Keith, and I wanted to get your take on that before we wrap up. Obviously, there's been reports today on Record Sport Online that Connor Cody's been approached by Wrexham. We know that was one that was in the offing for a long time for Rangers. How many more players do you think? I know you said 4 or 5 to come in potentially to the starting 11, but how many more players realistically do you think Russell Martin will want to add in the next, before the transfer window shuts?
Yeah, 4 or 5.
4 or 5?
I really do. I think he'll want at least 2 more wingers. I think the centre forward situation probably needs to be resolved. Certainly needs to be resolved one way or the other. They're either keeping Gassama and Dessers, or they're selling one or both. So there's an issue that needs resolved. And I think, straight from the off with Connor Cody, we know that it was actually quite far down the line in terms of Rangers being committed to signing him being committed to wanting to go to Rangers. So it's interesting that it's not done yet, and it's interesting that Wrexham, who've obviously got a few quid, it's interesting that they've re-emerged as a potential. So you wonder what's going on with that one. I'm pretty sure that Russell Martin will want an extra, an experienced operator at the heart of that defence. I didn't think John Souttar had his best night tonight in terms of in possession, but again, I come back to it. He's been asked to build from the back and play out from the back, and it just looked to me as if Rangers were a little bit confused as where they should be and what they should be doing in that final third. So it was problematic for John Souttar. He was trying to drill passes into Danilo. Danilo was struggling to control it. The ball kept coming back the way. But in terms of what John Souttar did defensively and what he did previously in the first leg at Ibrox, I think he's been a standout in terms of getting his head on things, blocking things, and a massive performance defensively from John Souttar over 2 legs, and which is why there was such confusion about the timing of his operation at the end of last season, because it's difficult to envisage how Rangers would have got through those two legs against Panathinaikos had John Souttar had a hiccup with his rehab and hadn't been available to play in these games.
I was going to say that, Keith. 6 weeks ago when you wrote the story for Record Sport, saying that he was in a race against time to be fit for Panathinaikos. See, it's all with hindsight, obviously. I don't think Rangers would have got through without John Souttar.
No. Souttar and Butland have been really terrific in the 2 games for them. How many Butland saves were in the first half tonight? Maybe 4 or 5.
Aye.
And I think that's a big bonus if you're looking for positives for Rangers. The fact that Butland appears to be back to Jack Butland season 1 version is a massive one, because obviously they had been linked to goalkeepers over the last few weeks before the first game against Panathinaikos. Butland pulled out all the stops in that first leg, and he's done it similar again tonight. And if Rangers are looking at where they can best spend their resources, I'm not sure that a new goalkeeper should be high on the agenda. Jack Butland, to me, on this form, will take some shifting.
In the comments, Thomas says Rangers have got a bye in the next round to win that tie comfortably. As we're sitting here right now, it's still 2-1 to Victoria Pilsen on the night, 2-2 in aggregate.
So that's going to extra time. So there's some wee guy in Switzerland right now on, I don't know what how you would translate to Hotline Live, but on the Swiss version of our show, oh, for God's sake.
There's one slight update though. Victoria Pilsen have had a man sent off.
Right.
So with 20 minutes to go. So as it stands, it's still going to extra time, but Rangers should know pretty soon who they'll be facing next week. As it stands, it's going to extra time.
So Hotline Live in Bern right now, they're preparing for the latest of nights. a 12 o'clock kickoff. With
the berries and cloves of garlic and that. Paul in the comments says, trying to play the Celtic way with inadequate players is what I see. As Keith said, it needs time, but you don't get time at the two big clubs trips. What was the other thing I wanted to get your take on before? We've got a lot of people, Keith, talking about Kieran Dowell again. We talked about him a lot last week. Billy says, why is Dowell in that part for Lyle Cameron? Look, I think it's pretty mad that in the year 2025, Kieran Dowell's still a starter for Rangers in a Champions League qualifier. But on the other hand, I need to hand it to him. He's not a match winner, but I thought he gave everything over those two legs. He really didn't stop running. And I think maybe that's why Russell Martin put him in, because he can depend on him.
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I've not seen enough from Kieran Dowell at any point during his time at Rangers to think that he deserves a starting place in a strong Rangers starting 11. He doesn't do enough. But I'm with you, Daniel, in terms of I think he was very disciplined tonight, and he was disciplined last week as well in terms of his duties defensively. He's in a front three position. That's what he's occupying. But he never looks as if he's going to hurt anybody. He's not going to get down the side. He's not a winger.
Aye.
So I think he's got defensive discipline duties to take care of. And there was a couple of times over both legs where he's popped up in his own penalty box with clearing the header or mopping something up. So yeah, you can't fault him for his effort. He looked absolutely shattered when he gets subbed off halfway through the second half, and I don't blame him for it. It was a hell of a shift. But let's get it right. If you're Rangers and you want to be taken seriously, your front three positions are where your most creative, dangerous players should be operating. Again, I keep using the phrase with Kieran Dowell, and I sound really harsh on him, but to me, as things stand right now, he's a square peg in a round hole, and he's covering and he's helping. And that's, by the way, he deserves credit for that. He's doing his shift for the team in a position that I don't think he's that comfortable in. And I think in terms of for Rangers to progress and for Russell Martin to take them up a level, well, he needs a Gassama on that right-hand side as well. But, in terms of things to be excited about for Rangers fans, I think they've got themselves an absolute gem in Gassama. The early indications could hardly be any better, could they?
He looks absolutely brilliant, Gassama. Looks like an absolute steal. We've had plenty of comments on that as well, obviously. But before we finish, Keith, the last thing that I want to ask you, Scooter Nation says, if Martin manages to get us to progress, I would argue it's just as big, if not bigger, than Gerrard getting us into the Europa League in his first season in charge. So I think he means into the Champions League proper.
Mm-hmm.
If Russell Martin was to do that, I mean, how do you quantify that as an achievement? I think that would be monumental. It would be huge if Russell Martin could pull that off. I've
got to be honest, Daniel. The odds I felt were stacked against Russell Martin, and I still do, in terms of, he's so much work to do in terms of rebuilding the squad, the personnel, getting players out the way, bringing players in the way. That's a big enough job without also having to revolutionise or try to revolutionise the way that you want the team to play, his style of play. So there's so much stacked against him. And he was going into this tie with the odds stacked against him. And that's why I'm saying congratulations to him. I really mean it, because he's been, listen, it takes a brave man. I think the Leicester job was there for the taking for if he wanted that, and he was certainly signed up for an easier life in a division in an environment that he knows really well. But he held that off. He held Leicester off because he wanted this Rangers job. He wanted this challenge, and fair play to him, because had this result gone the other way, and it could have done over the course of these 2 legs, he'd be right up against it already before the first ball of the domestic season has been kicked. And I think Rangers fans, and there was one comment there earlier about, for Rangers fans, the most important game is on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
Because they want their side to throw down a domestic challenge. And they've not been capable of doing that. They have had good results in Europe. Tonight will rank right up beside them because of its importance, and because Panathinaikos, are a decent scalp to take for Russell Martin, a guy with no European experience as a coach. So for all these reasons, he can be delighted. But I think most of all, he's bought himself a bit of breathing space. Yes, the performance level can look better than that. It has to. But he's bought himself breathing space. And at the bare minimum, he's got Rangers group stage football up until the new year. And that's a big achievement. It's a big string in his bow. Yeah. And it's quite a lot of pressure off his shoulders at this point. Because if it had gone badly against Panathinaikos, and he then went into a really difficult-looking Europa League qualifier, doubleheader, and that went badly, then what sort of position would that have left him in right at the start of this job? It's a huge job for him. I think he's got lucky over the 2 legs. I think he would have to admit that himself. But the most important thing for Rangers and for Russell Martin is they've got through this tie, they've come out the other end of it, and they're now looking, you would look favourably upon them in the next leg, whether it's Servette or Pilsen.
Yeah. Luke Skywalkerson, glad we avoided extra time that heat. I'm just glad we avoided it so we weren't doing the hotline live in the early hours. I think that more or less brings us to the end of tonight's hotline live with Record Sport. Craigie in the comments says good luck Hibs and Dundee United, and we'll be back tomorrow to do it all again at 6 p.m. when we'll obviously be previewing Hibs, Midtjylland and Unastrass and Dundee United. And I mean,
they'll be previewing that because they'll be kicking off just as we're kicking off.
I was saying that, I was thinking I've made a mess there. If we can re-record that'd be great. No, we'll be back at 6 p.m. tomorrow. Thanks so much for all the comments tonight. They've been amazing. The numbers, we can see the numbers watching. Fantastic at this time of night. And we're really appreciative. It's still 2-1 to Victoria Pilsen. And yeah, Keith, it's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Dan.
And thanks to everyone watching at home.
Night to night. Thanks, people.
Cheers.